The afternoon I was kidnapped, I was silently conjugating ancient Greek verbs while waiting for an overpriced cappuccino in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Elara Moretti, 28, assistant professor of classical linguistics, fluent in 7 dead languages,
Signore,
and catastrophically bad at living
voi
ones.
siete...
I could translate prayers from 3,000 years ago, but I still ordered pasta like
Signore.
a tourist, which made it especially
voi
cruel
siete...
that the last word I spoke before everything changed was in Italian. The
Signore,
black SUV pulled up to the curb so
voi siete...
smoothly. Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. I didn't notice it. What I noticed was the barista's hand freezing mid-pour, her eyes going wide at something behind me. Before I could turn, a gloved hand, large, calloused, and smelling faintly of expensive cologne and gunpowder, clamped over my mouth. Another arm wrapped around my waist. Swift and precise. I tried to scream, but the sound died in his palm. My laptop bag fell to the ground, papers scattering like startled birds. Years of research fluttering into Manhattan traffic. Then, a cloth pressed against my face. Chloroform. I recognized the scent, though that didn't stop the panic. The world tilted, then vanished. I woke in a room that smelled of old leather, cigar smoke, and something darker. Money that didn't ask permission. My head pounded. My mouth tasted like fear. I was sitting in a velvet armchair, the kind that cost more than my car. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline glittering beneath the bruised blue of early evening. 40 floors up, maybe more. The door opened. 3 men entered. 2 were muscle. Silent, expressionless. The kind of men who'd seen blood and stopped being surprised by it. But the third man, he moved like power given shape. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably tailored. And his eyes, cold steel gray, scanned me with the kind of focus that stripped away pretense and left only truth. "Senator D'Amato's daughter," he said finally, his voice deep, deliberate, the sound of authority sharpened by control. "Welcome. I apologize for the inconvenience. Your father has been difficult." My breath caught. I'm not... What? He studied me like a scholar dissecting a lie. "Your identification says otherwise." "I'm not anyone's daughter worth kidnapping," I blurted. "My name's Elara Moretti. I teach at Columbia. I translate dead languages for a living, not political scandals." One of his men handed him my wallet. He examined it, his face unreadable. Then something in his expression flickered. Realization. "You're not her," he said softly. "I told you, there's been a mistake." The silence that followed was thick, dangerous, until I made the one mistake that would change everything. "Signore," I said, instinctively, the Sicilian slipping out without thought. I'd been practicing dialects for a research paper, and the word felt natural, respectful, safe. But the reaction was anything but. He froze. Every muscle in his body locked. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. He turned slowly toward me, his eyes suddenly human, haunted even. "What did you just say?" My pulse stuttered. I said Signore. It's Sicilian. I didn't mean... Say it again." "What?" "Say it again," he repeated, voice low, trembling between command and plea. Something in his tone made me obey. I whispered, "Signore." He inhaled sharply, like the sound itself had hit him in the chest. For the briefest moment, that mask of cold authority cracked, revealing grief, nostalgia, longing. "My grandmother," he said almost to himself. "She used to call me that. No one has, in 20 years. He turned away, jaw tight, shoulders rigid. And in that instant, I realized something terrifying. This man, whoever he was, could kill without hesitation. But one word in the language of his dead grandmother had just undone him completely. That was when I first saw the danger behind his composure. Not the kind that came with guns or power, but the kind that came from feeling. He faced me again. "You really are a linguist." "Assistant professor," I corrected automatically. The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You academics and your titles." He stepped closer. Matteo Corsini. The name landed like thunder. I'd read it before, in whispers, in newspaper footnotes, in stories about a man who ruled the Corsini syndicate from the shadows. And now he was standing 3 feet away, his gaze burning through the space between us. Elara Moretti, I said quietly. Because names are power and I refuse to feel powerless. His hand extended. I hesitated, then took it because refusal didn't feel like an option. His grip was firm, warm. You can let me go now, I said, trying to sound calm. No. One word. Soft. Final. The kind of word that didn't just close doors, it sealed fates. As he turned away, my mind spiraled. Not with fear, but with something stranger, curiosity. How could a single word, a forgotten dialect, pierce through years of built-up control? How could language be powerful enough to stop a man like Matteo Corsini in his tracks? Maybe that's why I study dead languages. Because words have a way of resurrecting the things we thought were buried. And maybe, just maybe, some words are dangerous not because of what they mean, but because of what they wake up. If you've ever said one word that changed everything, one word that hit deeper than you intended, what was it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what Signore moment you've lived through. I woke to the scent of lemon soap and linen. For a moment, I thought I was home. My tiny Columbia apartment where stacks of research papers doubled as decor and the hum of the city was my lullaby. But when I opened my eyes, I saw silk sheets, a chandelier glittering like captured stars, and walls the color of soft cream. Not home. A prison disguised as paradise. I sat up slowly, my head still pounding from whatever they'd used to knock me out. A breakfast tray sat nearby, silver ornate, with real china and coffee that smelled almost sinful. Good morning, Miss Moretti. The voice startled me. A woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and a professional calm that spoke of long service. I'm Magda, she said. Mr. Corsini asked me to check on you. Mr. Corsini kidnapped me, I said before I could stop myself. Magda didn't flinch. He also asked that you join him for dinner at 7. Is that an invitation or an order? With Mr. Corsini, she replied softly. There is rarely a difference. She left the tray and walked out. The door clicked shut, not locked, but final. The penthouse was bigger than any museum exhibit I'd ever been in. 6 bedrooms, marble hallways, a library with more first editions than my department's entire budget, and one man whose presence could fill it even when he wasn't in the room. Matteo Corsini, crime boss, multimillionaire, and apparently my accidental captor. I wandered into the library mid-afternoon, drawn by the scent of old paper and sandalwood. The shelves were floor to ceiling, leather-bound volumes in Latin, Greek, and, to my surprise, Sicilian. The Sicilian collection's on the 3rd shelf. The voice behind me made me jump. I turned, heart leaping, and there he was. Gone was the tailored armor from the night before. He wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, sleeves rolled up. The look somehow made him more dangerous, less untouchable, more real. You read Sicilian? I asked cautiously. He stepped closer, his gaze tracking the book in my hands. My grandmother taught me. She refused to speak standard Italian, said Sicilian was the language of survival. I glanced at the handwriting in the book's margins, notes written in spidery script. These are hers? He nodded once. She left me her library when she died. Every word she wrote, every poem she copied, it's her voice. His tone softened, and I saw something flicker there. The boy he used to be before the man he'd become. She taught me that language is power, he said quietly. The right words can build an empire or burn one down. I swallowed hard. Is that why you kept me here? Because I said the right word? He looked at me. Really looked. Eyes that had ordered death now filled with something startlingly fragile. I kept you, he said slowly, because when you called me Signore, I remembered who I was before all this. The confession hung between us, raw and impossible. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and the warmth vanished. The boss returned. I have business, he said, his voice controlled again. Dinner at 7. Don't make me send Magda twice. He turned to leave. Matteo, I blurted without thinking. He froze. I'm not your enemy, I said softly. You don't have to control me. He turned just enough for me to see the corner of his mouth twitch. You think control is about enemies? No, Professoressa. It's about survival. And then he was gone. That night, I sat across from him at a table large enough for 20, set for 2. Candles flickered between us, reflecting in the wine. You came, he said, almost surprised. I was hungry, I said. His smile was small but real. Then eat. You'll find the chef exceptional. I poked at the ossobuco on my plate. You're surprisingly hospitable for a kidnapper. And you're surprisingly calm for someone being held by one. Touché. He poured wine into my glass himself, not waiting for the staff. Tell me about your research. Why? Because I want to understand you. I hesitated, then said, I study how languages evolve when people are displaced, how words carry memory, culture, identity. He listened, genuinely interested. So words keep people alive. Sometimes, or they haunt them. He nodded slowly. That I understand. For a while, we ate in silence, comfortable, unnerving silence. Then he said, almost absently, You think I'm a monster, don't you? I think you're complicated. That earned a real smile. Complicated. I'll take that over monster. He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. Tell me something, Elara. If language can preserve the past, can it also change it? I set down my fork. Maybe not change, but it can redeem. Words can make sense of what's broken. He studied me for a long moment, and I could feel the shift between us. The faint crack in his armor widening just enough for something human to escape. Later, lying awake in the bedroom that wasn't mine, I replayed his question in my mind. Can words redeem the past? Maybe that's what he wanted from me. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but translation. Someone who could turn his brokenness into meaning. It's strange, isn't it? How we build walls around our hearts, then one unexpected word, Signore, finds the exact crack where light can get through. Maybe that's why I couldn't sleep, because I wasn't sure anymore whether I was trapped or chosen. And maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous thing about Matteo Corsini wasn't his power. It was that I wanted to understand him. Sometimes the walls we build aren't meant to keep danger out. They're meant to see who's brave enough to climb over. What about you? If someone saw through your armor, would you let them in or shut them out? The next morning began like a dream I didn't remember falling into. Sunlight bled through sheer curtains, scattering across the marble floors. The city below hummed faintly, a reminder that somewhere out there, people ordered coffee and complained about the weather, while I was being served breakfast on fine china by a woman who spoke in silences. Magda set down a tray of fruit and coffee. Mr. Corsini asked me to tell you the elevator is unguarded this morning, she said, eyes darting away. My heart skipped. You mean I can leave? She didn't answer directly. He trusts you won't make him regret it. Her tone made it sound less like freedom and more like a test. I hesitated only long enough to grab the nearest thing that felt like armor, a notebook, and my courage. Then I stepped into the hallway. The elevator opened into a private lobby, guarded only by glass and silence. I pressed the button. The floor indicator blinked and blinked, then froze. The doors slid open again. Matteo stood there. He wasn't in his usual tailored perfection. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms, the top buttons undone, exposing the faint lines of a tattoo that disappeared beneath his collarbone. He looked both exhausted and dangerous, like a man who hadn't slept, but couldn't afford to. Going somewhere? He asked. Out, I said too quickly. For air. You said I wasn't a prisoner. You're not, he said, stepping in and letting the doors close behind him. But the city isn't safe for you right now. I've lived in New York my whole life, I snapped. I think I'll survive a walk. He tilted his head, studying me, half amusement, half warning. You really believe that? What are you afraid of, Matteo? That your enemies will mistake me for your missing senator's daughter again? He didn't respond. But something in his expression shifted, darker, sharper. They already know you're here. My breath caught. What do you mean? He stepped closer, voice low. Someone leaked that I took the senator's daughter, but they also leaked that I didn't let her go. Realization hit. So they think I'm still her. They think you're leverage. The air between us thickened. For the first time, the danger felt close enough to touch. So what now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now, he said. You stay alive, and that means staying here. Hours later, I found myself in the library again, pretending to study his grandmother's books while my mind replayed his words. They think you're leverage. There it was, the trap. Not bars, not locks, but perception. If I left, I'd be hunted. If I stayed, I belonged to him. I traced the faded handwriting in one of the old books. Sicilian verses of a folk song Matteo had mentioned. La luna è a mezz'amore, mamma mia maritari. The moon is at mid-love, mother mine, I want to marry. I whispered it softly, the vowels rolling off my tongue the way his grandmother might have said them. You remember the words, Matteo said from behind me. I turned. It's a beautiful song. He leaned against the doorway. She used to sing it while she cooked, said the song was a prayer, that love and danger were the same thing, only one was more honest about it. Your grandmother sounds like a poet. She was a strategist, he said quietly. She believed love was the most dangerous power of all. There was a pause, the kind that felt like the edge of a confession neither of us wanted to make. Finally, I said, Is that why you built this empire? Out of fear of it? He smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly. No, Professoressa. I built it because I thought I could control everything. But love... He stopped, the word catching like a weapon turned inward. Love is chaos, and chaos doesn't take orders. That evening, the quiet of the penthouse shattered. I was reading on the couch when the sound came. Distant at first, then unmistakable. Gunfire. Not the cinematic kind. Real, raw, bone-shaking. I froze. Magda burst into the room, face pale. Come, she said, grabbing my wrist. He said to bring you to the safe room. What's happening? Don't ask. Just move. The hallways blurred. My pulse thundered. Somewhere behind us, the sound of boots echoed, and then distant shouting. Magda pressed her palm to a panel in the wall. It slid open, revealing a steel door and a small, dimly lit room filled with monitors. Stay here, she said. Don't open the door unless it's him. Then she was gone. The door sealed shut. On the monitors, I could see the penthouse, the grand rooms I'd walked through hours earlier now transformed into chaos. Men with guns, shadows moving fast, flashes of muzzle fire. And in the center of it all, Matteo. He moved like a storm in human form, precise and relentless. I wanted to look away but couldn't. This was who he truly was, a man carved by violence, shaped by necessity. When it was over, the monitors showed silence, bodies, smoke. Then Matteo appeared on one of the screens, looking directly into the camera, directly at me. His lips moved, forming two words I could read clearly even through the static. I'm sorry. When he came for me later, his shirt was bloodstained, his hands bruised. Yet his voice, when he spoke, was almost gentle. You saw, he said. I nodded, unable to speak. Those men weren't here for you, he continued, but they would have used you to get to me. I saw you kill them, I whispered. All of them. His expression didn't change. That's what it takes to stay alive in my world. And what about me? I asked. Am I supposed to just forget that? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. No, you remember it. You remember exactly who I am, and you decide if that's someone you can stand to look at. The silence stretched. And then, almost brokenly, he said, You made me remember my grandmother's voice, Elara. You made me remember the boy who wanted to build something that didn't require blood. I can't afford to feel that again. Why not? Because every time I feel, someone dies. He looked at me then, not as the boss, but as the man beneath him. That's why I keep you here. Not as a prisoner, but as a reminder. The only thing I can't afford to want. I should have been terrified. Instead, I was undone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. The way his hands had trembled when he said, I'm sorry. The way he'd whispered about love like it was a weapon that had once turned on him. And in the quiet dark of that room, I realized something dangerous. I wasn't afraid of Matteo Corsini anymore. I was afraid of what he made me feel. It's strange how fear changes shape. Sometimes the person we fear most isn't the one holding the gun. It's the one holding the part of us we thought was untouchable. What about you? Have you ever met someone who made you afraid of feeling again? Days passed. Though it was hard to measure time inside a world where the sun existed only as a rumor filtered through glass and wealth, Matteo had vanished into his empire. I saw him only in passing. In the briefest flashes, the sound of his voice in another room, a coat slung over a chair, the faint scent of cedar and smoke that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Magda said nothing about the gunfire, about the bodies that had been removed in silence that night. Life resumed, as if death was a minor inconvenience in Matteo Corsini's schedule. But something inside me had shifted. I began exploring the library again, searching not for escape, but understanding. The third shelf of his grandmother's collection was full of journals, hand-stitched leather, pages yellowed with time. The handwriting varied between elegant and frantic, as if her emotions changed the way ink obeyed her. One journal caught my eye, embossed with the initials CMC. I opened it carefully. Most of it was written in Sicilian, but fragments of English broke through. Phrases translated by someone who wanted her words to live beyond borders. To love is to surrender power. But to be loved, truly loved, is to remember who you were before you needed it. The line felt like a whisper through time. I didn't realize Matteo was standing behind me until he spoke. She wrote that after my grandfather died. I turned, startled. You should stop sneaking up on people. You should stop touching things that don't belong to you, he said. But there was no heat in his voice. I held up the journal. It feels like she wanted to be read. He hesitated, then stepped forward and took the book gently from my hands. She wanted to be remembered, he said. She used to say the worst death wasn't being buried. It was being forgotten. He set the book down and sat opposite me, elbows on his knees. She taught me everything. How to speak, how to fight, how to hide pain behind elegance. I studied him. And did you hide it well? He smiled faintly. Until you said that word. Signore. He nodded. After she died, I stopped speaking Sicilian. It felt like betrayal to say her words without her. And yet you kept her books. He looked at the shelf. I couldn't destroy them. I just stopped opening them. His voice grew quiet. You remind me of her, you know. The way you read the world like a text that can be translated if you just find the right syntax. My heart twisted unexpectedly. And what do you think I'll find if I translate you, Matteo? He looked up. And for a heartbeat, the boss was gone. Only the man remained. A mistake I can't undo. That night, I dreamt of him. Not as the man with blood on his hands, but as a boy sitting by candlelight, listening to his grandmother recite poems in Sicilian, not yet knowing how love and loss would shape him. When I woke, the world outside my window was washed in rain. It made the city look softer, like even steel could ache. Downstairs, Magda was waiting with tea. He left at dawn, she said. Business in Palermo. Palermo, I repeated. He's going back? She nodded. It's been years. He never returned after... She stopped, as if realizing she'd said too much. After what? She shook her head. That's not my story to tell. But it was the first clue, the first thread of something buried beneath his empire of silence. 3 days later, Matteo returned. He looked different, tired, haunted. The sharp control in his eyes replaced by something that looked a lot like sorrow. You went to Sicily, I said. He nodded. I had to see where it all started. And? He sat on the couch, pouring himself a drink. And I found out that ghosts don't stay buried just because you stop speaking their names. He handed me a small velvet pouch. Here. Inside was a pendant, silver, shaped like a coin, worn smooth with age. It was hers, he said. She used to say it carried protection for the person who speaks truth. I looked up at him. Why give it to me? Because you speak truth even when it's inconvenient. There was something unbearably intimate in the way he said it. as though truth itself had become a language we both understood. "Matteo," I said carefully, "what happened in Palermo?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, with quiet resignation, he said, "My grandmother didn't die of age. She was killed." The words hung like smoke. "She was protecting me," he continued. "A rival family wanted to send a message. She stood in the way." My breath caught. "I'm sorry." He looked at me, eyes sharp but wet with memory. "Don't be. I've spent my life building walls made of vengeance. Every brick had her name carved into it." He laughed bitterly. "And then you came along, saying that one word, and suddenly, I don't know whether I've been building a fortress or a tomb." He leaned back, covering his face with one hand. "Maybe both." I sat beside him without thinking, close enough to feel the tremor in his breath. "Your grandmother wouldn't want you to live in her death," I said softly. "She'd want you to live in her language." He turned to me, eyes searching mine, then reached out, fingertips brushing the pendant now warm in my palm. "You sound like her," he whispered. And for the first time, I saw him unarmored. Not the boss, not the legend, just a man, tired of being haunted by his own survival. Later, alone in the library, I opened another one of her journals, the one written entirely in Sicilian verse. I translated a line aloud, softly enough that the walls seemed to lean in to listen. "A man becomes free not when he controls his enemies, but when he stops fearing his heart." I wrote it down in my notebook. Maybe that was Matteo's real story. Not the empire, not the violence, but the quiet war between his power and his heart. And maybe mine was learning that even in the darkest worlds, understanding someone could be its own form of rebellion. Because maybe love wasn't about saving someone from their darkness. Maybe it was about refusing to run from it. Some people enter our lives like translations of the truths we were too afraid to speak. They remind us of who we were before fear taught us silence. Have you ever met someone who made you remember an old version of yourself? Someone you thought was long gone? It happened 2 weeks later. By then, the rhythm of my captivity had become disturbingly ordinary. Morning tea from Magda, quiet hours in the library, the occasional glimpse of Matteo moving through the penthouse like a storm restrained by discipline. We spoke rarely, but when we did, something always shifted. Small tectonic movements beneath the surface. A shared look. A word too heavy to be casual. He'd begun asking questions about language again. About meaning. About what words could hide. And that was how it started. With a question. "Do you believe," Matteo asked one evening, "that words can carry blood?" I frowned. "You mean, like inheritance?" "Exactly." He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat across from me, the amber light catching in his eyes. "You once said language carries memory. But can it carry lineage?" I smiled faintly. "You sound like one of my students before midterms." "Answer me anyway." I considered it. "Yes, some dialects, especially Sicilian, preserve entire family histories through idioms, even phrases. Words passed down like heirlooms." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected. "Then tell me, Professoressa, how would you explain this?" He handed me a folded letter, yellowed, brittle, and sealed with a wax crest that had faded into a blur. The handwriting inside was delicate, careful, Sicilian, but with a fluency that made my heart skip. "Per la mia nipote non nata, figlia del mare, trovami nel sangue e nel nome che condividiamo. To my unborn granddaughter, daughter of the sea, find me in the blood and the name we share." My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" "It was in my grandmother's last journal," Matteo said. "Hidden between the pages, dated a year before I was born." I stared at him, pulse hammering. "So, she wrote it for your cousin?" He shook his head slowly. "She only had one grandchild." The world tilted. "Matteo, what are you saying?" He looked at me, his gaze heavy with something like disbelief and recognition all at once. "I ran your name through an old archive in Palermo. Moretti isn't just a surname, it's a branch of the Corsini line, from my grandmother's sister." I blinked, trying to understand. That's impossible. Your grandmother was Lucia Corsini." The room fell silent. My throat went dry. my grandmother's name, the woman I barely remembered, a soft-voiced presence in my earliest memories. He continued, his voice low. Lucia was exiled from Sicily after the family fell apart. She changed her name, married a professor, moved to America. But before she left, she and my grandmother made a pact. If the Corsini line ever turned dark, Lucia's blood would be the light to remind it what it once was. I shook my head. You think that's me? That I'm some kind of family prophecy? He didn't answer, just looked at me like the answer had already been written in my face. That's why you reacted when I said Signore, I whispered. It wasn't just her word, it was our word. He nodded, almost reverently. You carry her voice, the same cadence, the same softness. You said her word like you'd been born knowing it. Something cold and hot all at once surged through me. So what now? I'm your family? The niece of a mafia matriarch? He looked away, jaw tight. It's more complicated than that. How could it possibly be more complicated? Because, he said quietly, I can't stop thinking about you. The silence was suffocating. I stood, my pulse hammering. Matteo, that's wrong. We share blood. His eyes met mine, fierce and pained. Not the kind that counts in this world. You're distant. By generations. But it doesn't matter. It feels like... Don't, I said sharply. Don't finish that sentence. He did anyway. It feels like I've known you all my life. That night, I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor of the library, surrounded by her journals, his grandmother's, our grandmother's, searching for something, anything, that could make sense of this. And then I found it, in the same journal that held the letter, a page tucked near the back. If my blood divides, let love be the bridge that heals it, even if it must come through strangers who remember the same sea. A shiver went through me. Maybe it wasn't coincidence that I'd ended up in Matteo's path. Maybe our meeting wasn't mistake. It was legacy. But the deeper truth terrified me, because I didn't just want to understand him anymore. I wanted him. The next morning, Magda came to me looking unsettled. Miss Moretti, she said. Someone called the house. They asked for you. For me? She nodded. A man with an American accent. He said he knows who you are, and that you're in danger. Did he give a name? Only this. Tell her history repeats itself. Then he hung up. History. It couldn't be coincidence. When Matteo came back from a meeting that night, I confronted him. Who knows I'm here? He stopped in the doorway. No one outside the family. Someone called for me today. They said history repeats itself. His expression hardened. What exactly did they say? I repeated the words. He swore under his breath. That's not a message for you. It's for me. Who? He turned away. A man named Rossi. He's been after the Corsini line for decades, since before you were born. He believes anyone connected to my grandmother's blood carries her curse. And he thinks killing me will end it? Matteo's voice dropped. He won't touch you. I won't allow it. You can't protect me from history, Matteo. He looked at me, anguish breaking through the control. Then let me rewrite it. That night, I found myself standing on the balcony, looking out over the city. Rain shimmered on the glass, catching the lights below like broken stars. Somewhere behind me, Matteo watched. Neither of us spoke. The silence said too much. For the first time, I understood why his grandmother had written about love and danger in the same breath. Because they were the same language, one learned only through loss. And I realized, standing there beneath his gaze, that I'd already crossed a line. Not by staying, not by forgiving, but by feeling. Sometimes fate doesn't bring people together by accident. It just waits until both are brave enough to meet the truth. Do you believe in that kind of connection? The kind that feels written long before you ever meet the person? It started with silence. That eerie, heavy kind of silence that feels like a held breath before a storm. Matteo had been gone for 2 days. A business trip, Magda said, but the worry in her eyes betrayed more than she spoke. I tried to focus on translating his grandmother's journals, but every word blurred. My mind kept circling back to him, the man who made my heart forget logic and my body forget safety. Then, sometime past midnight, the penthouse went dark. The power cut out completely. For a moment, The only sound was the hum of my own pulse. Then, a faint click. Metal. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. I froze. Footsteps. Slow. Calculated. Coming closer. I reached for my phone. Dead. My voice trembled before I even realized I was whispering, "Magda?" No answer. A figure moved in the shadows of the hallway. Tall. Armed. Panic clawed up my throat. Before I could scream, a hand covered my mouth. But this time, it wasn't Matteo's. "Quiet!" a voice hissed in accented English. "Make one sound, and I'll decorate the walls with you." The barrel of a gun pressed against my ribs. He dragged me through the dark halls. I could barely breathe. Every instinct screamed to fight, but fear is a paralyzer more powerful than any drug. Then, headlights cut through the windows. The front doors burst open. Gunfire. Again. But this time, I wasn't in a hidden safe room. I was the target. The man holding me stumbled as bullets tore through the air. I fell hard, my shoulder slamming against marble. And then I saw him. Matteo, emerging from the chaos like a ghost resurrected. His coat drenched in rain, his gun steady, his eyes pure fire. He fired twice. The man who'd grabbed me dropped instantly. Smoke. Silence. Then his voice, rough, desperate. "Elara." He was beside me in seconds, hands trembling as he brushed my hair away from my face. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, unable to speak. He exhaled shakily, eyes closing for half a second before pulling me into his arms. I felt his heartbeat hammering through his chest, wild and uneven. "You weren't supposed to be here," he murmured. "You were supposed to be safe." "Where were you?" My voice cracked. "You disappeared. Magda wouldn't tell me anything." His jaw tightened. "Rossi, he's closer than I thought. He has people inside my circle. That's how he found you." I pulled back to look at him. "Inside your circle? You mean—" "Someone I trusted sold me out," he said bitterly. "And they gave him your name." "Why me?" "Because he believes your bloodline holds what his family lost." He paused, his voice low, haunted. "He's not after me anymore, Elara. He's after you." The hours after the attack blurred into sirens, shadows, and whispered orders. Matteo's men moved through the penthouse like silent soldiers, clearing the aftermath. When the last body was taken away, Matteo led me to his study. He poured himself a drink, but his hands shook so badly the glass nearly slipped. "Matteo," I said softly, "you need to rest." He looked up, eyes raw, voice low. "You don't understand. Every time I try to protect something, it gets destroyed." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." The glass shattered against the floor. He pressed his palms against his eyes, breathing hard. "My grandmother, my family. Everyone I've ever cared about. I should have known you'd be next." He turned away, shoulders shaking, the mask finally breaking. I stepped closer. "Matteo!" He spun around, eyes bright with something between grief and fury. "Don't you get it? This is what I am. I built an empire on blood. You can't build love on top of that and expect it to survive." "I never asked you to love me," I whispered. "Then why do you keep looking at me like I'm someone worth saving?" The words sliced through the air like glass. "I don't see a monster," I said, voice trembling. "I see a man who forgot he was allowed to stop being one." He stared at me, breathing unevenly. "And what if I don't know how?" "Then let me remind you. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But something shifted. An invisible vow written in the air between us." He looked at me the way men look at miracles they don't believe they deserve. "Stay here," he said finally, voice breaking. "Please, until I end this." "What are you planning?" "To find Rossi and finish what he started." "No," I said, stepping in front of him. "You can't keep answering death with death. That's the only language he understands." "Then teach him another one." He looked at me like I'd spoken an impossible truth. "Elara," he said quietly, "in my world, peace is just the pause before the next war. Then make this the last one." He left before dawn. Magda stayed with me, silent but watchful. The hours crawled by in fragments of fear. Every sound made me flinch. Every phone vibration felt like a countdown. When the call finally came, I almost didn't answer. A male voice. Unfamiliar but venomous. "He dies tonight, and you'll follow, just like your grandmother." Click. The line went dead. By the time Matteo returned that night, I was shaking. His suit was torn, blood staining the cuffs. He walked straight to me and said only 2 words. "It's done." I didn't ask how. I didn't need to, but something in his eyes told me this victory hadn't freed him. It had hollowed him. He sank onto the couch, breathing raggedly. "He's gone. Rossi, all of them. And still, I feel nothing." "Maybe feeling nothing is just what grief looks like when it's too heavy to carry," I said softly. He looked up, eyes glassy. "I killed the last man who threatened you, and somehow it feels like I lost anyway." "Because killing doesn't fix what's broken," I whispered. "It only keeps it quiet." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain outside was relentless, a storm that refused to move on. Then Matteo said, almost to himself, "You should leave tomorrow. I'll arrange protection. You'll go back to your life." "And you?" He smiled, tired, distant. "I'll stay here. In the only world that fits me." My throat tightened. "That's not living." "No," he said, "but it's safer for you." He turned away, but I could see the pain in his posture, the slow unraveling of a man who'd spent his life hiding his heart, and had finally found someone who made him wish he hadn't. And for the first time, I didn't try to stop the tears. Because sometimes, love doesn't ask for permission. It just hurts you into remembering you're still alive. That night, I wrote in my notebook, the one filled with translations and fragments of his grandmother's words. I wrote, "Some storms don't destroy you. They reveal who's willing to stand beside you in the rain. Maybe we all have a moment when love feels too dangerous to hold, when walking away seems easier than being seen. If you were Elara, would you leave to protect your heart, or stay to protect his?" The night after Matteo told me to leave, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that quiet ruin behind his calm, the way his voice broke when he said, "I'll stay here." It felt wrong to leave him drowning in a sea he'd built just to keep others from sinking. I watched the dawn creep over the city, a thin, golden light stretching across the skyline like forgiveness trying to find its way through glass. And I decided I couldn't go. Not yet. Magda found me in the library that morning, surrounded by journals again. "You're still here," she said, more statement than question. "I need to understand something before I can leave." She hesitated. "He won't like that." "I don't think he likes much right now," I said softly. She sighed, then handed me a small brass key. "If you really want to understand him, there's a locked drawer in his study, bottom left. I shouldn't be giving you this." "Then why are you?" "Because you look at him the way his grandmother did. Like you see the man, not the myth." The study was dim, curtains drawn against the morning light. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside, folders, letters, and an old photograph. I lifted it carefully. A boy, maybe 12, standing beside an elderly woman, Matteo and his grandmother, her arm around his shoulder, her smile proud and fierce. But what caught my attention was the edge of a folded document tucked behind it. I pulled it free. It was a passport, issued to Lucia Moretti, my grandmother, but stamped in fading ink was the Corsini family crest. My breath hitched, and beneath it, another paper, yellowed and brittle. It was a death certificate, but not hers. It was his grandmother's. And the date, 22 years ago, didn't match what he'd told me. She hadn't been killed in a raid. She'd been found, poisoned. And the signature at the bottom wasn't an official seal. It was handwritten, by Lucia Moretti, my grandmother. I felt the room tilt around me. She'd been there. She'd witnessed the death, and she'd lied to protect someone. Who? I didn't hear Matteo come in until he spoke. "You shouldn't be in here." I turned, clutching the papers. "You lied to me." His face darkened. "Give me those." "Your grandmother wasn't killed in a raid, Matteo. She was poisoned, and my grandmother was there." He froze, his jaw clenched, his voice low. "Where did you find that?" "In your drawer. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he said, stepping closer, "I didn't want you to know what she died for." My heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" He exhaled sharply. "Your grandmother didn't just witness it. She did it." The words hit me like a blade. "No! She didn't mean to," he said quickly, voice breaking. "It was an accident. Rossi's father had come for them both. Lucia tried to save my grandmother, but the poison meant for him. She switched the cups too late. I stared at him, tears stinging my eyes. And you've been protecting me all this time because you thought she owed you? No, he said fiercely, because I owed her. She died trying to save mine. Everything I've done, everything, was to make sure her bloodline never paid for my family's curse. My knees weakened. I sank into the nearest chair. He knelt before me. You were never a mistake, Elara. You were the one thing in this whole damn story that was pure. I looked at him through blurred vision, and yet you still kept me here, to keep you safe. You kept me because you were afraid of losing what you'd already lost. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. I kept you because every time I looked at you, I remembered what forgiveness looked like. Silence. Heavy. Holy. I reached out, fingertips brushing his cheek. Then forgive yourself. He closed his eyes. I don't know how. Start by not running from what's real. He looked up at me then, and I saw it. The moment the walls finally cracked. All the power, the control, the armor, stripped down to the frightened boy who'd once believed love was fatal. And I realized the truth his grandmother had written decades ago. The heart's greatest rebellion is to love what the world says is unworthy. That night, I stood on the balcony again, the pendant he'd given me warm in my hand. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 tiny resurrections, and I felt something inside me shift, not toward fear, but toward peace. Matteo joined me quietly, a glass in his hand. I should let you go, he said. And yet, here we are. He smiled faintly. You're braver than you know. No, I said softly. I just decided I'd rather live the truth than survive the lie. He looked at me, the kind of look that sees and remembers. Elara, he murmured, I don't deserve you. Then earn me. He exhaled, a sound half laugh, half prayer. Tomorrow, he said finally, we go to Sicily. There's something you need to see, something that belongs to both of us. What is it? The last letter my grandmother wrote, the one she never sent. When he walked away, I stayed on the balcony, watching the first stars fight through the mist. For the first time since this began, I wasn't afraid of where this story was heading, because love, when it stops hiding, becomes a kind of truth the world can't unmake. Sometimes strength isn't about fighting harder, it's about finally stopping the war inside yourself. Have you ever forgiven someone not because they deserved it, but because you deserved peace? The flight to Palermo felt like traveling through someone else's memory. Below us, the Tyrrhenian Sea shimmered like melted glass. Ahead, the Sicilian coast rose, dark green and gold under the late sun. Matteo didn't speak much. His hands rested on the armrest, tense but close enough that once, halfway over the Mediterranean, our fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. When the car turned off the main road toward the old Corsini villa, I understood why he'd waited so long to return. The house stood half in ruins, half in defiance. Stone walls veined with ivy, shutters hanging loose like tired eyelids. Yet even in decay, it was beautiful, a place built by love and haunted by consequence. It's been 20 years, he murmured as we stepped out. She died right there. He pointed toward a cracked marble fountain where rainwater had gathered. She was reading when it happened. The wind carried the scent of citrus and salt. I could almost imagine his grandmother's voice, low and rhythmic, reciting poetry to a boy who still believed the world was kind. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and memory. Magda had flown ahead to prepare the house. She waited in the foyer, holding a small sealed envelope. Where did you find it? Matteo asked. In the piano, she said. Just like she said it would be. He broke the seal with a shaking hand. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, looping, alive even after death. He read aloud. My Matteo, and to the one who will one day carry both our blood, the world will tell you that love makes you weak. It does not. It makes you remember. When the sea takes me, promise me this. Do not avenge me. Build something gentler than the violence that raised you. He stopped, his voice unsteady. She knew, he whispered. Even then. He handed the letter to me. At the bottom, a final line written in smaller script. Give this to the woman who speaks in my tongue but was not born to it. I looked up, heart pounding. She meant me. He nodded slowly. She wrote this decades before you were born. How could she possibly? Because she believed blood remembers what the mind forgets. We walked through the villa in silence. In the library, her library, the walls were lined with the same books I'd seen in New York, their spines faded but familiar. On a table near the window sat an old cassette player. Matteo pressed play. A woman's voice filled the room. Crackling but clear, warm and melodic, the cadence unmistakably Sicilian. If you're hearing this, you have survived our curse. You are the bridge. Matteo closed his eyes. Pain and wonder tangled in his expression. She recorded this the week before she died. I listened, heart thudding. To my Matteo, when you meet the one who speaks the word Signore with the softness of mercy, listen, that is your forgiveness. Tears blurred my vision. She was talking about you, he said, voice breaking. Always you. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, the same kind of storm that had ended her life. Matteo turned toward the window, jaw tight. I spent 20 years chasing vengeance, he said, and she left me a prophecy about mercy. He laughed, a sound half sorrow, half relief. Maybe I was the last to understand her language. No, I said quietly. You just needed someone to translate it. He looked at me then, and everything unsaid between us finally found its voice. Elara, he whispered. I don't know how to be anything but this. Broken, dangerous, afraid. Then be it, I said. Just don't let it be all you are. For a moment, neither of us moved. The storm pressed against the windows, lightning slicing the sky open like truth. Then he stepped forward, closing the space between us. When he kissed me, it wasn't the kind of kiss that asks permission. It was the kind that confesses everything words never could. Grief, guilt, longing, hope. It was fire meeting water. And when he pulled away, breathless, he said, She was right. You are the bridge. The thunder cracked again, closer this time. Magda appeared in the doorway, pale. We have to go, she said. The police found Rossi's estate burned. His men are coming this way. Matteo straightened. How many? Too many. He turned to me. Get in the car. No, I said firmly. Not this time. You said your grandmother wanted peace. Then let's give her that. No more blood. Elara, I'm not running from the truth anymore. Neither should you. He hesitated, torn between instinct and conviction. Then he lowered his weapon. We stepped outside together as headlights appeared on the distant road. The rain had begun again, hard and unrelenting. Matteo's men spread out along the terrace, guns drawn, waiting. Stay behind me, he ordered. I didn't move. No more killing! The cars screeched to a stop. Dozens of figures spilled out, weapons raised, but then a voice rang out over the chaos. Corsini! A man stepped forward, older, scarred, Rossi's lieutenant. It's over. He's dead. We came for peace. Matteo lowered his gun slowly. Peace? The man nodded. He made a mistake coming after her. The families agreed. No more blood. Not for this. For the first time in years, Matteo didn't know what to do with his hands. He turned to me, rain washing down his face like baptism. You see, he said softly, you didn't need to save me with war. You saved me with words. I smiled through tears. Your grandmother did. I just translated. He laughed then, real laughter, rough and free, and pulled me into his arms as the storm broke open above us. When the rain finally eased, the villa stood silent again. Peace, fragile, tentative, but real, settled like a benediction over the ruins. Matteo took my hand and led me inside, back to the fountain where it had all begun. He placed the pendant around my neck, fingers lingering just long enough for me to feel the tremor of emotion he couldn't hide. Stay, he whispered. I met his gaze. Always. And when he kissed me again, the world didn't end. It began. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with silence. It arrives with the sound of rain after years of thunder. What about you? Have you ever learned that forgiveness was stronger than revenge? 3 months later, The Sicilian summer had ripened into gold. The Corsini villa no longer felt like a mausoleum. Workmen's voices echoed through the courtyard, scaffolding climbed the walls, and laughter, real, human laughter, returned to rooms that had once known only whispers. I sat on the terrace with a notebook balanced on my knees, translating the last of Nonna Corsini's poems. The air smelled of lemon blossoms and wet stone. From somewhere in the vineyards below came the sound of Matteo shouting instructions to the men who were rebuilding the old fountain. He was always moving now, planting, restoring, planning. It was strange to see him in daylight, sleeves rolled up, hands streaked with dust instead of blood. When he noticed me watching, he raised a hand in mock salute. "You're supposed to be working, Professoressa." "I am," I called back. "You're just my favorite distraction." He laughed. That unguarded, impossible laugh that still startled me every time. That evening, when the workers left and the cicadas began their low hymn, we walked through the garden together. The fountain was finished at last. Water spilled through the marble mouth of an angel into a small pool that caught the moonlight. Matteo sat on the fountain's edge, turning his grandmother's old ring in his fingers. "She would have liked this," he said, hearing water again instead of silence. "She'd have liked seeing you like this," I said softly, alive in the way she meant. He looked at me for a long time. "Do you ever think about going back? To your university? Your classes?" "I think about it," I admitted. "But I also think maybe my research was never about dead languages. Maybe it was about finding one still alive." He smiled faintly. "And did you?" I nodded. "It's called forgiveness." After dinner, we sat beneath the olive tree that had survived every storm. Fireflies drifted between the branches like slow sparks. Matteo poured 2 glasses of wine, his movements easy now, unhurried. "Rosi's family signed the accord yesterday," he said. "No more feuds. We'll use the estates for trade, not war." "That's what peace looks like," I said. He nodded. "It feels strange. I don't know what to do with quiet." "Learn to listen to it," I said. "That's where the truth lives." He leaned back, watching the stars. "Do you think we're allowed to have this? After everything?" I rested my head against his shoulder. "Maybe we're not owed it, but we can still choose it." Later, in the small hours, I woke to find him gone from bed. The window was open, the sea breathing beyond it. I found him outside on the terrace, barefoot, staring out over the dark hills. "You couldn't sleep either?" I asked. He turned, smiling a little. "I keep thinking she's still here. Every time the wind moves through the trees, it sounds like her voice." "She probably is," I said. "She spent her life trying to keep this place alive. Maybe she's just making sure we don't ruin it again." He chuckled softly. "She'd approve of you." "I hope so." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're the reason I'm still standing, Elara. I don't know what to call that." "Call it beginning again," I said. By morning, the villagers began arriving with baskets of bread and flowers, the first open celebration on the Corsini grounds in decades. Children ran through the gates, music spilled from the courtyard. Matteo greeted them one by one, offering food instead of orders. It was a strange kind of redemption, the boss turned builder, the feared man now just another neighbor. When an old woman pressed his hands and whispered, "Signore Matteo, grazie," I saw the way his eyes softened, the same way they had the day I first called him that word. As the day waned, he found me again at the fountain. "The workers left this for you," he said, handing me a small leather-bound notebook. Inside were translations, his grandmother's poems written side by side in Sicilian and English. The last page was blank except for a title written in his hand. "For the one who remembered the sound of mercy." "It's yours," he said quietly. "Finish it." I traced the words with my fingertips. "We already have." He smiled, then took my hand and led me toward the water's edge. The sun slid behind the hills, painting the sea in copper and rose. "This was where she told me once," he said, "that love isn't a promise. It's a choice you keep making even when the world tries to unmake you." He turned to me, eyes bright. "So I'm choosing." I felt tears sting but didn't look away. "Then so am I." He leaned in, and this time the kiss wasn't desperate or broken. It was steady, certain, the kind that says home. That night, long after the guests left and the music faded, I wrote the last entry in my notebook. We came from blood and loss, from words that outlived their speakers. We learned that language can wound and heal, that love can be both punishment and salvation. But mostly we learned that remembering isn't the same as reliving. Some memories are meant to be laid down like flowers, not carried like stones. I closed the notebook, placed it beside the old pendant, and let the silence of the villa settle around us. It no longer felt like grief. It felt like history exhaling. Months later, we opened a small school on the grounds, a place where children from the surrounding towns could learn languages, music, and trade. Matteo taught them old Sicilian proverbs. I taught them how to find meaning in forgotten words. Sometimes, when I heard the laughter echoing through the courtyard, I'd think of Nonna Corsini's last line, "Love makes you remember." She was right. It had brought us here, to the edge of peace, to the chance of beginning again. And every time Matteo passed me in the hallway and whispered, "Signora," it no longer sounded like a ghost. It sounded like a promise. Maybe every story about love is really a story about language. The things we finally learn to say, and the things we choose to leave unsaid. If you had one word that could heal a story from your past, what would it be? Leave it below. Maybe someone else needs to hear it.